money on. So look at everything in the budget. So let's go over the recommendations. I've been saying a lot of these for a long time, and I'm not saying these are recommendations of the committee. Remember, I'm one person. It's not a disclaimer. I'm just telling you the truth. These are recommendations I'm saying should take place, but we haven't had a vote, and nor do I even believe we're going to have a vote. But this goes to the treasurer, just so you know the mechanics. Our recommendations go to the treasurer. The treasurer and the governor to prepare a piece of legislation, which goes to the legislature. So there's a lot of steps. Legislation coming back in October. We feel like we're going to be done by the end of September. And then that legislation will be written by the treasurer's office, I believe, and given to the legislature. So that's what I think timing-wise is going to take place. But the recommendations I'm telling you, think of them coming from me. This is not the committee saying them, although some of these could make it to the end. Been saying this for a long time, raise the retirement age. One of the things I've always said is we should raise the retirement age to Social Security age. And by doing that, you take the politics out of it. So in the future, if the federal government raises the Social Security retirement age, it automatically goes up in the state. You don't have to go back and have a vote on it again, and we can all just blame the feds for doing it. So, they raise it. I mean, really, you got to think about things as being both financial and politically, how do you get it done? Because to me, in everything I try to do, I think about two overarching principles. Does it make economic sense? Is it politically feasible? So, you got to think about, if we're truly going to be citizens to affect change, we have to come up with, do your research, come up with solutions, but then you have to help the political leaders get there from here. And these are the things I'm saying. So maybe by turning over to the feds and pointing to Social Security, we can blame them every time they raise it, but we'll benefit from that. Unless we're Bolivia and they reduce the age, and then we're getting ourselves in trouble. All right, so let's talk about raise the retirement age, and then maybe have like a sliding scale. So if you decide you want to retire earlier, the actuary mathematically figures out what you get. You're not going to get the full amount because you're retiring earlier. And so that's one thing. Another one would be eliminate the COLAs. Just eliminate it. Strict enforcement of disability pensions. Increased contributions by the people working. One of the things I've always said for the longest time, I really believe that it should be in a contract, there should be an actuary run the numbers before any contract is approved. The actuary should run the numbers, not only what it costs this year, what it costs 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, the effect on the unfunded liability. And I've always believed if you're under 80% funded and you want to give people additional benefits, have the actuary run the numbers. If the actuary says in order to sign this contract you have to put $3 million in the contract in the fund today, you put the $3 million in today. Go forward and approve the contract. They're not going to be able to come up with $3 million to do it. And number one, if they publicize what it is, the public's not going to stand there and just say, hey, just raise my taxes to put $3 million in this fund. So to me, I really believe have an actuary in the room. You know, what I find many times in my 15-year career is when elected officials win, the one that loses doesn't really share information with the new person that came in. Many do, but there's a lot that don't. And so that transfer of knowledge doesn't take place. But I've been in many meetings when the union leaders pull out some side agreement that was signed like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, that no one knows about, but it actually was signed by another mayor. So there has to be this transition of knowledge from one to another. It's just an aside, but I've seen that through my experience. One of the things I believe there should be a law that's passed that says all future contracts for cities and towns, the benefits cannot exceed the benefits of state employees. Because, like I said to you before, the legislature made a lot of great changes. And I know Governor Kucheri's here, and through his leadership, there were a lot of recommendations for changes, and they were made. And that's great that they were made. But you know what? The cities and towns didn't step up to the plate and do the same thing. So maybe what has to happen is there is a law, pass a law that says all future contracts, benefits cannot exceed what's given to state employees. Just by doing that alone, will reduce the unfunded liabilities for the cities and towns. And they should do that. And we look at legislation that was passed this year, tremendous thing about switching people over to Medicaid if they're retiring. If they're retired, they're collecting health insurance from the city or town. But when they reach the age where they're ready for Medicare and Medicaid, they don't switch over. They stay with the plan. If you think of that law passed this year, it was a great piece of legislation. When that law passed, that just city and province alone saved them $13 million per year. That is a lot of money. That's something that should be done, but it wasn't done. But you need a piece of legislation to get it done, and it was done. So, kudos to the legislature for doing that. Right, because including the 85%, assuming you were paying for health care. So there's all sorts of calculations. So that's why I told you it's a complex problem. But to me, we should have a hybrid. You have some amount that's sort of like a 401k, defined contribution, some amount defined benefit, maybe for the first $30,000. That's an example, just there. But you have a lot of people that are not sophisticated in their investments. So I truly believe you wouldn't want every employee just taking the money and investing in themselves, because if they blow all their money in their investments, they will eventually become a ward of the state, and it's going to become a liability of the state later on. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. So to me, if you set up with some companies, some investment companies, and maybe you had funds set up that you're going to retire in 2020, this is what would be invested, 2030, different mix of investments, and so on. That way you take some of that risk out for the people. I know I'm like near the end. I got to wrap up now, right? I know. I'm going to jump to just a couple of quick things on Central Falls, and then I'll come right back to closing out my call to action for all of you. And like I told you, I can talk about this for 8 hours. There's like so many problems, so many things we can do to solve them. But let's just talk about Central Falls for a second. Here it is, like how can you miss it? You have a city in our state go into bankruptcy. I've got some problems with all the things happening in Central Falls, and a lot of the stuff I'm about to tell you now, my wife tried to make me promise I wouldn't say them, but I woke up this morning and I said some things just have to be said. They just has to be. And, so I guess I'm going to tell you, Anton Scalia, one of the Supreme Court justices, had a comment. He said, "These are my opinions, and they just happen to be correct." So I'm going to give you some of my opinions on this. Number one, I really believe our state should have a system in place where they're reviewing trends way in the future to see that you're going to have cities and towns that have financial problems. This is one that could be seen, that would take place. There needs to be, and I know when Gary Sass was there, they started the work at the state, develop key performance indicators. To me, we should have these key performance indicators. They should be posted for all the public to see. And government officials should look at that and say, look, I got these cities and towns trending in the wrong direction. The thing I want to share with you is, please don't look at the city of Central Falls as the black swan, that 1 in a million chance. I tell everyone, the city of Central Falls is the canary in the mine shaft. If you know that story, they put a canary in the mine shaft because the canary will die if there's not enough oxygen way before a human being will die. And that's the signal to everyone to get out of the mine. Well, I'm telling you, the city of Central Falls is our canary in the mine shaft. Severe problems, unfunded pensions, the post-retirement benefits, contracts they couldn't afford to pay, expenses that well exceeded their revenues. But let me tell you a few things. There's a few really good things that happen and some bad things that happen. I truly believe the state should not be in the business of running a city or a town. The state has been running the school system for over 20 years. And for over 20 years, it's one of the highest costs to run the city, and is not the highest performing school. So I don't think the state is the best person to run the system. Another thing, and I know there's at least one person in this room who I said I wasn't going to say this, I'm going to say this. I never really understood why you put a judge in charge of a city or town when they're in financial trouble. It's a financial problem. It is not a legal problem. It's a financial problem. And you've got to figure out the finances of it. So to me, I've always believed it should be financial people that solve financial problems. You can hire an attorney to solve the legal problems, but it's purely financial. And the other thing I've told the previous receiver, and I told the receiver before that, all of us in this room with an Excel spreadsheet, we can figure out how to solve this problem. But this is not an Excel spreadsheet problem. These are people. This is a community. And I know in the beginning people talk about carve it up into maybe 4 pieces and give it to the surrounding communities, and I'm like, wait a minute. The people live in a community. It makes more sense that you move them into one city or one town and add them to it. Just like certain towns, like the town of Johnson has thought in the area, the Granville area, where you could have, not picking up Pawtucket, but it seems to get a lot of play this week, but say it went with Pawtucket, it could be one other section of Pawtucket, the Central Falls area. But to me, there is no way that a city the size of Central Falls should be a separate city. There's no reason why we have 39 cities and towns in our state. 39 police chiefs, 39 fire chiefs, 39 finance directors, 39 controllers and CFOs. It doesn't make sense. There's no reason why we have cities and towns doing the payroll when you have outside companies that do payroll for people much cheaper than it can be done in the city of town. And I never saw a mayor get elected for having a good payroll system. So there are plenty of ways that you can reduce expenses. But there's a few things I want to clarify, because I've heard it on the radio and I've seen the news. The first one is people saying that Wyatt Detention Center owes $3.5 million to the city of Central Falls. That is absolutely incorrect, not factual at all. They do not owe, not even $1 to the city of Central Falls. The $3.5 million is not owed to them. The city of Central Falls received $500,000. If you want to know some of the problems why Central Falls is the way it is, I'll give you one example. They received $500,000 the year before from the Wyatt Detention Center, and the following year when they prepared their budget, they put in for $1.2 million in the budget. No one told them to get $1.2 million, but that made the budget balance. And that's why the $1.2 million was in there. But they don't owe the money. And to me, a great piece of legislation was passed by the state. This legislation about the bondholders and letting them go first. And I say it's great, and it's great for this reason alone. Because if that didn't take place, when we had Central Falls go down, you would see the ratings drop for every single city and town in the state of Rhode Island. So it actually was a very good piece of legislation. But I gotta tell you, from a personal perspective, the greatest thing in the world is to be a bondholder now. You're number one in line. To me, they should all be rated AAA, and actually they should pay a premium on every single bond in the state of Rhode Island. And before I give my closing, my last bit of advice, if you want to help solve the pension problem in the state of Rhode Island, I say the state of Rhode Island should go buy all the bonds for the city of Central Falls. There's like about 21 million. Let's say, for example, there's 20 million. Right now, they're selling 60 cents on the dollar. They have a piece of legislation that passed that puts them first in line. So those bondholders, I'm not giving financial advice to you. I don't get sued. I'm giving advice to the state of Rhode Island. You go out and buy $20 million of bonds at 60 cents on the dollar, and you know they're good for 100. This part of your problem solved. You just made $8 million. So they let me go buy the $20 million. I bought it. I'm not telling you about it. Let me close, because I know I could talk forever. Let me close with this: the call to action. Here's the thing. There's going to be legislation to try to solve this problem. I'm telling you today, from my years of experience, you are going to all, as citizens, need to rally around to get this thing passed. There's going to be a lot of forces to try to stop this. But we need to fix this, because if we don't fix it, we are passing on to children and grandchildren. And this really is, I go back to David Walker, the former Comptroller General. Whenever we do presentations together, he always talks about the first 3 words in the Constitution. It's we the people. So we the people, we are ultimately responsible and accountable for what does and does not happen. We have a responsibility to do this. And I'm going to close the way I always close, to tell you the difference between a river and a reservoir, and about exercising leadership. And this is what I'm asking all of you to do. As far as I'm concerned, when I talk about this and about exercising leadership, it's not the title. If you think about the difference between a river and a reservoir is a body of water just sitting there waiting to be used. Well, that's all your experience, your education, things your mom and dad taught you, everything piled up in that reservoir, just waiting to be used. But that is not leadership. That's the title on your business card. If you want to know what exercising leadership is, think about a river instead. A river can be wide and a river can be narrow. When the river is wide, you're going to be dealing with a problem that addresses a lot of people. And when it's narrow, you're going to deal with a problem that just addresses a few, maybe just one, maybe just you in your career. But a river can be shallow and a river can be deep. When it's shallow, you're going to have a problem that you only have a couple of solutions, and you have to solve this problem, but that's all you have. You can't wait for more. And when it's deep, you're going to have a lot of solutions. But I don't know about you, but looking around the room, you have a lot of experience. I guarantee you've probably seen it. I've seen people paralyzed by too many solutions and they can't pick the right one. There's a story that if you put two food sources equally distant from a dog, that the dog will starve to death because he doesn't know which one to go to. So sometimes too many solutions cause a problem. A river can move slow and a river can move fast. When the river's moving slow, I can take the time to educate every single person in this room. I can take the whole weekend with you, explain to you the problems and how to solve them. But sometimes the river's moving fast, and I don't have the time to do that, and it's the urgency to solve the problem. I'll grab you by the arm, I'll pull you across the river. I might break your arm, I might break your leg, but I'm going to save your life. And there's situations, and I think we're in that situation now with our deficits, to solve this problem. But the biggest difference in leadership, and the biggest difference in a river, is a river can change the landscape. And if you think about it, as a river's moving along, through erosion, it wears out the sides. And sometimes it bumps against a rock or a tree, bores a hole through, it goes around the tree in a different direction. I'm asking all of you in this room, I'm asking every single one of you to look beyond the horizon, look beyond yourself, and let's find a way to solve this problem. Let's be the river that causes change. But let's do it in a professional manner, not throwing rocks. And let's not make this a class war between people with government pensions and people without. There are many other items in the budget. So thank you.